All right, no more easy sketches today. The last few days have been these types of like very almost modern art, like just very simple sketches. But today we're doing a wild, crazy lighthouse boat turned into a mansion. So just typical stuff. If you want to expand on this, please do. By the way, this is not like an actual house, although in Homer there's a pretty crazy looking one that almost looks kind of like this, but I have hodgepodge together a lighthouse and we got a little boat here and then I stuck a couple extra bits and put an outhouse right there. But sometimes I just like to make a kind of wild little building. This helps me with architecture, which can be kind of tough sometimes too. You can have a lot of fun with that. So let's jump into a bunch of this right here. And for a painting like this, it's going to be kind of tough, and we're going to do it in a few different sort of layers. When I look at something like this, I just have to break it apart in my mind of what is light, what is dark, kind of what is the order of something like this. And in this case, I'm going to use a lot of white. I'm going to have this be a white boat too. And so I'm going to need to put in all of my semi shadows basically right now. And then we'll come back in here and fill a lot of that in later on. So let's start with that. Honestly, the easiest way to start any painting, because you have no real, no real consequences if you mess up like a light blue. So I'm just adding some water and water to everything. I'm gonna have to replace some paint here in a second, which is exciting. I love it when I kind of get down to that level. It's like it's like having to, switch out. Um, I don't know what it's like having to switch out. It's like having to switch out a palette. It's the only analogy I've got. Nothing quite like it. A little bit of blue, making sure that's pretty watery there because I want it to be relatively light. And I'm going to figure out where my sun is coming from, which based on my bears, sun is coming from this direction. So anything that is in shadow, in this case light shadow, is going to be on this side. So I'm going to put a little bit of light shadow right here on my lighthouse because it is a curvy thing. And you'll see I'm going right through. I'll probably make this little stripe right here red. I'm going right through it because light blue, basically everything can kind of paint over light blue. A little bit there. We'll put a little bit maybe right under here, maybe a bit on this side of this little boat, and then maybe even a bit down here, just on this side as well. It seems like the smallest thing, but I do feel like these little shadows sometimes make the biggest difference. And then maybe a couple up here as well. There we go. Something as simple as that. If you want, you could rinse your brush, mix up a bit of water, and you could even add like a bit of a bevel almost, with like a lighthouse or something. But honestly, I don't think it makes too huge of a difference. So it's kind of just if you have time for it or not. These little bits up here, I'm thinking are going to be kind of light brown because I'll be adding some of that. If we want to, we could add some of that in now. Basically, I'm trying to add in all of the light colors to let them dry before we jump into some of the rest. And then while they're drying, we'll work on the background. So here's like a little brown, just making these little tiny extra structures. We'll make this one brown. Maybe I'll fill in that little outhouse right here as well. Architecture, well, there's lots of different ways to do architecture, but the trick is not to get it too detailed too quick. That's almost always the temptation, is just to add everything in, but you kind of need to give it a little bit of time sometimes. And last, let's add a little bit of a beach here. So we're going to kind of let a lot of this dry. And if you're still working on it, that's totally fine too. But we're just going to let a lot of this dry. And so it's going to be kind of bouncing back between everything. Back to that brown to add just a little bit into this here beach. I'm just going to kind of try to color match whatever I have on that. So if you have a more purpley beach or if you have whatever it is, just try to give it a little bit of the same treatment. Same down here, maybe a touch of purple. Right there. Now, if you've ever wanted to live in one of these houses, this is a much cheaper way to do it. You can just paint yourself in. So I've got a little figure kind of walking their way along. There's some pretty wild houses here in Alaska. There's one that people call the Dr. Seuss house. It's up near Fairbanks, and it's kind of like a version of this, where it's just like a small little room stuck on top, but it's, I think, 17 stories. So imagine 17 of those going straight up. There's this other boathouse in Homer that's quite distinctive that looks a little bit like this actually. Might be subconsciously inspired by. And I'm gonna add maybe just a touch of that brown as well. I'm gonna come back in here and any of the little areas that aren't touching, that aren't already wet, I might add in a little bit of brown, a little bit brown here. What else needs a touch of brown? Maybe this roof right here needs a bit, or maybe this little piece of the building. Making kind of a hodgepodge house like this is extra fun because you can't get it too wrong. Normally architecture is kind of scary because it's like if you put one window a little bit too far to the left, it really sticks out. But if you're worried about that, just make your entire building, something that would not stand up to code, and you're gonna be just fine. All right, so I've got a little person, a little bit of beach here, and then I'm gonna put in this background here because these are gonna be dark. This is why we're doing all of this first. These are gonna kind of hollow out and carve out a lot of these spaces. So it's gonna be time to add that little bit of that green in that background, which will take a while to dry. Kind of fun matching some of those techniques, but if you have been doing the rest, you are an expert at this point. You know how to add washes, how to kind of get those tones. You know about 10 different ways to get any of these textures. So I'm going to add some water to start, and then probably just a bit of yellow and a bit of green. Here's my bit of yellow. Trying to match, it looks like I got a nice little kind of fade, little bloom there, and then a bit of green. Real easy and simple. This is sort of the style of painting I usually like to kind of sneak back into if I'm ever having a tough time, or if I feel like I'm not doing well as an artist or something like that. Who knows what it is? It's these little kind of fun ones that I like to get back into. Yeah, touch of blue in here too. It's these little tiny fun ones I like to get back into because it's really almost just for me. This is not a commissioned painting. Nobody, I'm not trying to get a house right or anything. It's just you got to find those subjects sometimes that you are purely painting for yourself. And that's kind of what this is. This kind of turns into, I find. Okay, that's looking great. And it's nice to get that in too because that just takes forever to dry. So it's kind of nice when you can get those in early on in the painting, like these two. Just frees you up in a lot of ways. Jump back into this here lighthouse. I'm not quite sure what color the roof of a lighthouse is. The lighthouse itself is going to be a little bit kind of, well, light, but I'm thinking the roof is maybe a purplish or maybe just gray. And you can make a gray by adding a blue and a brown together. So I'll just mix those up a little bit. See what this turns into. Some form of gray? Yeah. I might have actually just chosen the exact color of the shadow, but that's fine too. That looks all right. A little bit of that gray. Yeah, we'll try that out for size. And then I've got to add another little bit of a roof down here. Maybe I'll just get a nice light blue. Just adding some water so that it kind of waters itself down. There we go. A little bit of water down there. Perfect. Okay. How is that all looking? Now these little portholes, little windows, all the rest, this is going to take some real dark paint. So that's going to be like the last thing we do. But basically we're kind of bouncing around until everything's relatively full and in. Like this right here. That's going to be kind of a brown maybe. Make some brown, maybe some purple or something. You're just kind of picking your colors. It's almost imagine this is a house that's been built over just generations here. Every single generation has another little tiny room. Personally, I would want to live on the top of the lighthouse, but that's just me. Okay, adding a little bit right there. There we go. If these look a little bit all over the place, that's fine. They will until kind of they're done. Well, I got some paint here. Maybe I'll finish in my little outhouse here. Got to keep that separate. I know outhouses on a boat are called the head, but I wonder if it would count if you have a boathouse. Do you have a bathroom or do you have a head if your boat is on land. I'm sure there's some terminology on all of that. All right, so we're waiting for this to dry just a little bit longer. And what we're going to do once this is dry is fill in this real dark section. This one is going to do the same. And then we're going to fill in our little person. But if your kind of beach here is dry, you can add one of two things. One is the shadow of our little person right there. Grabbing just a touch of indigo, looking what direction our sun's coming from, and just adding a bit of shadow. That one's not too wild. And the second is the path. And a path really, I mean, in the sand, it's just something that is slightly darker than the sand here. So you can grab some brown, or you could also just grab some indigo because it's opaque. So it is just going to make whatever that color is just a little bit more blue below it. Add a little bit down there. Kind of hides your shadow, but that's fine. There's our path. You could even, if you wanted, you could add just a touch down here to kind of show those bushes having a nice little shadow as well. Something like that. Lovely. Okay. How's this looking? How's this feeling? Is this comfortable? Is this uncomfortable? I feel like this is either something people have been doodling forever or it's like way out of the comfort zone. Now the next thing, while I got some of the indigo kind of playing around on my palette, this is sort of the secondary shadow. You'll see I'm kind of just trying to get the right shade because I want some, but I really don't want it too thick. I want just that perfect thickness of, a little bit of water and a little bit of paint, but not too much because I'm going to come down here and add the secondary shadows. So we have our kind of first initial shadow. Here's our secondaries, and it would be something like this, almost like a little triangle. Keeping in mind where that light is, but something almost like that. You see what I'm doing there? Maybe a bit down here. You're just imagining where that light is coming down, like on our lighthouse right here, hits and it kind of bends around. It seems like a little thing, and honestly, you probably can't even see it too well. Let me see if I can just usually tape the painting down so I don't get too excited and throw it around. But do you see right there? I mean, it's like a little tiny thing, but it makes a difference. Same down here as well. Let's see if I can do it while holding. So like this right here, it'd have a bit of that shadow. These two have some of it right here. Oh, I can't do it. Down here would have some on it, just a couple like this. But you have like it. I feel like the more complex you get, kind of these little shadows, they seem small, but they do add up. A little bit right down there. Maybe even some on this boat, but probably not too much. And then some right in here. But you kind of got to know what your order is because you can't add this in later. That's kind of that mark of like, okay, you know what you're doing with shadows. Also seems weird to do something on something so tiny like this, but it does add up. It's also a great little technique. Just learn how to add a few shadows. It turns your paintings, it just brings them to life. It's kind of wild. And the same is affecting like landscapes and mountains and big stuff and small stuff all alike. Okay, got a bunch there. That's looking great. And now let's add some of these little shapes down here. I'm thinking just a little bit of green, maybe kind of same deal. A little yellow followed by a little green. Here's my yellow right in here, and here is some green. Just a little 1-2 punch. I'm hearing some noises outside. It sounds like the birds are coming back to the feeders. Either that or a moose has stepped into our yard and is eating the birdseed. Do a little bit of this yellow on this side as well. Right over here. Now, I do feel like with paintings, I often kind of I find that I go in waves. Sometimes it even happens within the course of a day. Sometimes it takes a month. Sometimes, it'll be a year and I'll notice I'm very different or feel very different than I did a year ago. But I'll be curious to know over the course of this whole series of paintings, how have things changed for you or have they? I know for myself, sometimes I do a bunch of these real broad things, and then it turns out I craved something that's detailed and minute and kind of, you know, a little quirky like this. Or sometimes I'll do a bunch of these and realize actually all I ever wanted to do is just push around paint. But I kind of love how much you learn, even into the process of doing a bunch of things. And when you have a little tasting palette like this, I feel like it really helps see a bunch of it at once. Okay, now I'm doing a little bit of blue in here. Just right on the edge, letting that kind of fade up. Easy and simple, but kind of fun. There we go. That's one of these ones. This is gonna look good once it dries. Looks a little bit messy right now, but I now know enough to know kind of how these things show up. Okay. Once things are really, really, really dark, this is probably gonna be the last thing we add, and we'll probably add this in before we add that in. But we can't add this in until this is dry, and once this is dry, then we add all the rest. So really, a chicken and an egg. That's what watercolor kind of always comes down to. But if I do the little finger test just to see how dry stuff is, it's like that's pretty dry. That's pretty dry. Our little secondary shadows all dry? Well, most of them are. While we're waiting for some of this, it might be time to add in some of those windows because they don't touch this outer edge. Normally, I'd say you don't add in those last little details until the very end, but with watercolor, it's kind of just about timing and, can you even move forward? You can't do anything with this person until that's dry. So might be time to add just a few of these windows, unless of course you want to try to add in this little bush just to give it a bit more time. And maybe we do that. Let's see what happens. It might fade into itself, but that's okay. We got two different bushes here. That'd be fine if that happens. Okay, a little bit of yellow here and a little bit of green. We're just trying to get something kind of light because this is going to be so dark. There we go. Pull a little bit down. And then this is probably enough for me to kind of come in with mostly blue at this point. That first bush, mostly green. Here's mostly blue because we got this lovely kind of bit of contrast we want to make with our boat. Otherwise our boat's kind of invisible. We want to get that nice bow. Now going over the part where Jack held Rose during the Titanic. Actually, he held Rose for most of that movie, but, off the edge of the scene I'm talking about. I should learn boat terminology before I paint boats. Okay, and then a little bit of coming down here. Just seeing if it is dry enough or if it's all going to mix into itself, which is fine if that happens. A little bit down here. You can always leave a little white line too. If you want, you can always, if you're worried about, two colors mixing, it is always acceptable. You can leave a little tiny white line. That's totally fine. There we go. And I'll just kind of push that up like this. The other little trick too is say these two don't quite match up. It's your painting. You can do what you want. I'm coming back in here and I'm adding just a touch of that other color just to let those make sure they mix a little better in between. Seems like cheating, but it's not. Okay, now onto those windows. So for these windows, let's see, move a tiny bit of that water away. Okay, for these windows, it kind of depends on how dark you want to get, how fast you want to get there. With indigo, I find that too much indigo, like if it's just like almost like pure paint, just raw, it kind of sticks and it's almost shiny. So I almost want like indigo with just a touch of water is what I'm looking for. It'll make it flow. There is a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is not pure paint. It is just a little bit of both. I think right there is perfect. It's like apparently some people drink whiskey and they put like a drop of water, like literally just a drop of water, and I guess that makes a big difference. More or less the same with this. We just want indigo with a drop of water. And now, it's the scariest part, but here we go. We're just going to add some little bits of window here. You could do this with Sharpie later on if you wanted. That's totally fine as well. You get a similar effect, but there's something about using the watercolor. It almost shows up a bit better. This little window right here, got this big kind of picture window from the boat. I got a bunch of little portholes as well. Just adding little bits here. I'm not messing too much with any reflection right now, mostly because it's so tiny, but also because if I want, once it's dry, I can always come back in there with a little bit of white colored pencil or gel pen or gouache or anything else. A little bit here, a little bit there. Okay, and then of course we got that giant door right down there. We'll get that in 1 second here. There's this big old door. Perfect. And you can start to see, look at this. It's all kind of coming to life now. Couple more little windows. It's amazing how thin these kind of little brushes get. Sometimes you might need a real thin brush, or if you're like me and your hands are a little bit shaky sometimes, it's it's like trying to get that perfect. But I've also found that for some reason, if I just relax and just let it happen, it like everything works out. If I overthink it, if I get too small, if I work too you know too conservatively, it doesn't happen. But if I just kind of zip through it, for some reason, it always seems to work out just fine. Okay, and there's our doors, our windows, and this giant little main door here too. Now let's add a big pop of color. It's gonna be one of the brightest things we have in this entire painting. Let's add that red while we're at it, right here. That big old stripe right across a nice lighthouse. Fun fact about lighthouses, the distance in between their spins will tell you what lighthouse they're at. So, you might count if you're far off and you see a spin of this lighthouse, it flashes, and then you might start counting, and it might take 3 seconds before it flashes again. The next lighthouse might take 4 seconds, and the lighthouse after that might take 1 second, and the lighthouse after that might take three and a half. But based on how fast it turns is what would give you a sense of where you're actually at, because otherwise you might think one lighthouse is another and you just crash into the next mountain. At least that's how they used to do it. A lot of lighthouses were decommissioned because, well, boats just got better navigation and stuff, but they're still just a cool idea. A little bit right here. Okay, here we go. And you'll see that little bit of, blue that we had there totally covered up, but when it all dries, it'll kind of come through as well. Give you some nice little bit of kind of a look right there. So this last little bit, it can't quite see all of this, but this last little bit, this nice dark bit of trees behind, that is what is going to bring this all to life. But we can't quite do that until we're a little closer here. So while I have my little bit of red, actually, I don't think I can do that here. Nope, looks like it's still wet. We'll hold off right there. In that case, let's go add some railings. That's going to be a little bit more with that indigo mixture we got there. A little bit of indigo right here. Just enough to get a nice smooth, very fine tip. And I'm just going to add railings. You could paint this all black and add some little white railings. That's kind of my last resort though, because I'm going to give it a shot here. And if I mess up, then that's what I'll do. But I'm just going to add some little bits of railing kind of in between what I already put there. Almost like you're just making a really bad barcode. Something like this. There we go. There's a nice little railing right there. Could do something similar to this one if I wanted. And like I said, I can always come back in there and fix it. It looks like I forgot my little outhouse roof. There's that. All right. Now it's almost time for that big swatch of blue right down here. But I just realized I forgot this one here as well. What was I thinking? A little bit of green. Just kind of grabbing the dregs. And then maybe a touch of blue as well. Right down here. There we go. Okay. I think it might be time just to go for it, see what happens. It might mean that these two kind of mix into each other, but that's fine. They kind of did over here as well. What we're trying to do is create kind of some nice dark forest, kind of in that shadow, and then be real careful around these edges. It's okay if this little clothesline gets hidden. We can go back in there and add stuff later on if you want to. But here is a little bit of water toward the top just to make it extend a little further, because I want it dark, but I don't want it heavy. There seems to be a real big difference between kind of a light dark and a heavy dark. I'm going to start with our nice little cerulean blue that is basically out because I want to match right there. Just gonna put some up right here, a little bit around, maybe a touch over here. Not a whole lot of this is going to be remaining toward the end. You'll see it kind of gets pushed into, but it's a good start. It's almost like laying down the tablecloth. And then a little bit of blue, followed by our purple. Here is a little bit right there. Just moving up into this purple. And I'm just going to kind of push around all of this until it all fills in. But mostly it's just something that's slightly darker than our little boathouse right there. Houseboat? Boathouse? Not sure which one gets the name here. Just concentrated thinking. Oh my gosh, for some reason these kind of lines seem to always be the toughest thing. Maybe if you did more color by numbers or painted the lines as a kid, this would be a little easier, but for some reason this is just the hardest thing for me. Okay, a little bit more up there. Might even add some purple in. Kind of nice little complement to the rest. Just breaking that color up. There we go. Woo! That one's coming in strong. Working through all of these trees. I used to think trees had to be real exact, but after doing a lot of watercolor, they're just blobs. Not sure if that's a good thing, but I'm appreciating the blob. Make the beautiful blob. Okay, a little bit right there. And now I'm gonna go mix myself up some nice dark colors, probably some indigo, probably some blue. Not too much either though, with a healthy amount of water. And let's go outline this. This is where architecture gets exciting. Coming along right here on the inside. Everything is still wet, so it'll move and flow real lovely and kind of smooth all of itself out, which is exactly what I want. Kind of circling around the problem because I'm kind of nervous to get into it. Oh, and it looks like we started. Okay. And you'll notice I absolutely just shaved about a quarter off this roof. That's okay because everything I'm painting is much, 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 much darker than what was already there. So you probably won't even be able to tell. Maybe there'll be a bit of a line, but for the most part, it'll be pretty hidden. Right to the edge. What's kind of cool is we're actually working on the final edge here with these kind of paintings. This is as far over as it gets, which means that we're not going to do another circle or spiral over to it. So you don't need to worry about whether or not this will match. This indigo is freestanding. If this is a puzzle, we're to the edge pieces. We're just kind of doing it opposite as people normally do puzzles. Get a little bit more over on this side now. Oh, looks like I just lost that roof as well. That's okay. This is what gel pens are made for correcting artists' mistakes. A little bit over here, right to the edge. This is almost the kind of painting that would benefit from some mask, which is where you let it fully dry and you basically put some rubber cement on it, and then you can just paint over in one fell swoop. But putting this much mask on would be a labor of love and a trial of patience as well. A little bit more down here, trying to get around that balcony, but mostly just trying to keep things steady. Okay, right to there. All right, well, that's not the worst. That's not the worst I've ever done. Not the prettiest, but that is okay. That will happen. Lovely. Okay. I think what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to add a little bit of color, just a pop of color to a person, and then I'm going to go see if I can dry this off, lickety split, maybe answer a few questions if you have them. And then I'm going to show you how I'd use a little bit of gel pen to, kind of add some architecture back into this. So here we go. A little bit of red. Just going to put a bit of red on a person because I like that contrast with our nice little lighthouse. Okay, just like that. And I'm going to go pop this in front of the heater and see if we have any questions and see if I can dry this out just really quick. But if you want to take a quick look, here we go. That's kind of how it's all turning out. But I think there's a few things that can really make that pop. Okay, jumping over to see if there's a few questions or not. No major ones right now, which is totally fine as well. But I will say, as things kind of scoot around, it is so cool to see all of these sketches come to life. Really appreciate everybody who's been sending them in. If you are part of the Trailbound Sketches newsletter, you we're highlighting some of them, but it's amazing how far this has gone. To think 25 of these is a lot of little paintings, but the fact that we're already on some of these edges, so really it's just kind of one more big turn as we go all the way around, and then these ones are finished. So if you have any thoughts too of other series or other ideas or other paintings or anything else you'd like to see, the hope is that we do continue stuff like this on. So whether it's a giant 25 picture series or we just kind of take it week by week, if you have any thoughts of techniques or subjects or anything fun like that, definitely send them over. Okay. Slowly. I can hear it. I can hear it drying. I put a lot of water on that last one. Actually, while I'm on it, I can show you some really fun stuff. People are something I've always been concerned of, but recently I just painted this, which I was really excited about. This is for an upcoming movie that we're working on, but this is possibly one of the favorite people I've ever drawn. This is on some real thick watercolor paper, so that it kind of stands up a little bit. But my technique for people used to be basically this. Upside down exclamation point, a little bit of color. That's about as fancy as I got. And having slowly drawn, I'm nowhere near those incredible portrait artists that everybody seems to draw, but about as fancy as I've gotten yet. And I'm really, really liking how it all turned out. This right here is normally what my people kind of look like. That's another piece for it, but just fun to be able to show those little things. Hopefully we're able to share more about that in a month or two. Okay, let's see. Is this dry at all? Oh, it's not bad. It's getting there. And you can kind of see some of the, those patches are still wet a little bit, but as it dries, it always gets a little bit lighter. So if you remember what it looked like 45 seconds ago, um, you'll notice it's already a little lighter. So I'll give it just a couple more seconds. See what we can do right there. And then we'll finish that one in. As we move down further and along, we'll be getting up to some snowy mountains as well soon, which I'm very, very, very excited to do. But also, if you do get a chance, we are hoping to do some really, really fun stuff about actually sending things out. Where there's things like this that you can actually trace, follow along. So if you're not already part of the newsletter or part of the website, definitely click on that, because we'll be hopefully sending some of those out very shortly, or at least getting it ready very shortly. Okay, here is this. That looks baked enough. We'll give it a shot. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. If you have one of those like nice light colored pencils, that works great. If you have a little gel pen as well, these work great for some real strong lines. And usually for something like this, you can see I lost a bit of my roof. So I might add just a touch of my roof back in. Same with this one up here. I always thought watercolor kind of had to be like, if it wasn't done exactly in one run, it didn't count. But there's all kinds of little tricks, and they are all fair game. Don't worry about any of it. If it works, if it makes it closer to a painting you'd like to see, it counts, and that's okay. Even something like this, if you wanted, you could add like a little bit of a crossbar in this window, like just like that. Maybe we'll put one right here as well. There you go. And sometimes it's those little tiny details like a clothesline right here. I'll even put a little shirt maybe on that. There we go, a couple little bits right there. And then you'll see it kind of dries a little bit lighter. There you go. Super simple, kind of fun. And then you can even come back in if you wanted. Maybe add just a dollop of red. And there you go. A little bit of a shirt or something. Super fun. Okay, now all we got to do is add a little bit of some legs to our person, and we are there, more or less. Very curious how this is all going, by the way. If this is good, if this is bad, you let me know. There's more techniques and little things that we can all put together, but mostly it's just patience. You got to give yourself some patience and time. Architecture is tough. Doing something like this is tough, but if you have fun, it gets really, really exciting. All right, so I've got some red on my brush still. I want to touch more up here. I think I want a bit more color as well, so I might just add a little stripe along the bow. I have no markers, no lines, but I'm just going to do it anyway because it feels like the right thing to do. Ooh, that might be a little bit too much. It will all dry darker, but I might need to add in some extra bits in that window. There we go. There we go. I like that. It's a bit more colorful. You don't have to do red. If you want to do blue or nothing, totally fair game as well. All right, now I got a little person right here. Touch of indigo. Just doing those legs. Maybe I'll give him a little hat or some hair. Hard to tell when somebody's this small. And there we go. Kind of wild, but really fun. All these different techniques. We'll do something a little simpler tomorrow, but you can add whatever kind of figures you want. You can really personalize this stuff. And just so fun to have something that's a little bit more busy, a little bit more complex in there. The form stuff is important, but sometimes you just want a bit of a messy, ramshackle house made out of a boat and a lighthouse. Can't wait to see what you came up with. Definitely send it over and stick with it. This is fun. Sometimes you need to make the painting that you wanted to have fun with, whether that's this or something else, and you deserve it. So make sure to go find that and maybe make that sketch this week.